Our media exploration for today is India ink. Take a look at the supply list on the right and grab your supplies. In addition to the supplies in your kit, there's a few things you'll need to look around at home. So pause and join us when you have everything on the list. Now it's time to set up our sketchbook page for the media exploration. Make sure you have 6 boxes across the top and they're measured 1 inch by 3/4 inch. Label the text for the 7 things listed to your left, and then make sure you have your line 3 inches from the right side. This is for notes you'll see later. Lastly, you're going to draw the ink jar and your sumi brush using the pen techniques you learned. It's time to take a look at those notes. So did you know that India ink originated in Asia and is often referred to as India or China ink? Once the India ink is dry, it's completely opaque and it's permanent. So you need to take extra care to cover your surfaces and wear clothing that you don't mind staining. We also have care and cleanup about washing your brushes with soap and water, gently dumping out your palette in a kitchen sink. That's important because a bathroom sink, it might stain. A kitchen sink is typically stainless and it won't stain it. And then lastly, you're going to wipe your palette down with a paper towel. Pause the video here and write these notes in your section on the media page. This is one of the most important steps of what we're doing today and anytime you use India ink, and that's setting up your workplace well and organized, and so that you don't make a mess or ruin any surfaces. So take a look at what I have here. Pause the video if you need to, and make sure you have everything set up so that you're ready to go and start the media exploration page with me. Okay, it's time to get started. So we have everything out. You need your straw, and we're going to use the straw to get the water out of the cup and into the palette. And you need to fill about 3, 4, maybe 5 of the wells in the palette with water. And you do so by sticking the straw in the water, putting your thumb over the end of the straw so it holds the water in, and then dropping it into the palette. Okay, it's time to open the ink, so let's pick that up carefully. Make sure that you are holding it level when you open it. Twist off the lid and sit the top of the cap down so the ink is up. And then use your straw to get some ink out and put it in one of the empty wells in your palette. And it took me about 2 strawfuls to get one filled up. When you're finished, put your straw in the water, place the lid back on top and screw it on tightly, and then sit it back on your workspace. It's very important that the jar stays closed on your workspace. Okay, now it's time to make different values so we can do a value scale of the ink. So we have the complete opaque ink there, and I'm taking some on my brush and putting it in the first well that has water in it. Now, depending on the size of your brush, it will pick up different amounts of ink. I had a very small brush, so it picked up a very little amount of ink. It looks dark, but I ended up having to darken it later. What you're doing here is just creating 4 different values in between solid black and completely white, using different amounts of ink. So this is trial and error in how you do this. So just play around with different ink dilutions until you get 4 of those values. So now it's time to fill in our value scale, and we're going to start with a straight black India ink to fill in the black box. Then we're going to work our way through our values. And you'll see as I go through here that some of my values are way too light, and I'm having to go back and add ink and adjust them as I go. The goal here is to get 4 distinct values of gray in between black and white. The white box at the end should have no paint in it, no ink in it at all, even a wash. You can also see that I'm using a paper towel to lift sometimes. You don't want to get so much water on the paper. It'll start like crumbling up because it's just a mixed media paper, so it can't hold a ton of water. So dabbing it off and kind of restarting helps, but just pressing it on there, not rubbing it. If you rub it on there, you're going to really rub a hole in your paper. So once you get those values on there, then you're ready to move on to the next step. So now we're going to try some different techniques with the media, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. So If you need to pause it as we go, or if you want to watch them all and then go back and do it, I understand. But I'm starting with a wet on wet, and I'm using the bamboo brush, the Sumi brush, to add a square of just clean water. And I used my clean water cup for that. Now I'm going to take my smaller brush and I'm going to pick up, I think, my darkest value, not the solid, but one up. And I'm just going to kind of wash it over the wet. So this is the wet into wet. And you can see how fluid it is. You can get nice soft edges because it's all in the water. All right. So that's your wet into wet. After each one, I want to rinse the brush because I'm going to be using different values for different things. Then I dipped my brush in the solid India ink and just drew a little line through the middle. And I want you to really watch how that line kind of spreads out in the wash. The next one is just a wash. So I just used my bamboo brush. They're really good for that, or the Sumi brush, because they cover a large area. And I got kind of a lighter value, and then I picked up a little bit of darker and washed that on top. And so when you need to cover a large area with a tone or a value, a wash is a great way to do that. The next one is a gradated wash, and a gradated wash is kind of going from dark to lighter. So I'm just kind of putting a regular wash on first, then I'm going to grab a little tiny bit of the full strength India ink and just add it to the bottom. This is a wet into wet technique, and it's going to kind of pull it up and away. And you can see where it's darker, the water is pooling there. If you don't want that, you can always use a dry brush to kind of lift some of that out, or a paper towel like we did before. This next one is wet into dry. And so I'm getting just a little bit of a value on my brush, and I'm doing line work. You'll see for the most part, you're getting kind of a crisper edge than you did when you were doing wet into wet or the washes. So the lines are soft and watery, but they have crisp edges. And that's your wet on dry. The next one is dry on dry. And notice how I'm drying my brush after every use. I'm going to go back to the small brush here. I'm going to make sure it's good and dry. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of the ink. And this is where you can try some of the pen technique that we did. So some hatching, some line work. I think I did a little stippling in here, but this is much more controlled. It's great for detail work. I know it's hard to see with my hand over it, but you'll see it in a minute. And it's just a great way to add detail on top of dried value. Remember, India ink, when it completely dries, you can add layers on top, and that's one of the great things about it. So had I done a wash and then I wanted to go in and draw on top, once it's completely dry, it's permanent. It's not going to move when I add more things on top. The next one is brush lines, and this is just playing with your brushes and kind of the pressure that you put on the brush. So when you press it all the way down, you're getting a thicker line. When you're keeping it high and using the tip, you're getting a thinner line. And then if you vary that and you push down and you lift up, and you push down and you lift up, you get kind of this undulating line. So you're getting some different line quality with your brush. You can try some squiggles, just experimenting a little bit with the brushes that you have. And then the last one is our found object. And I have several here, and you just really need to have one, but I have some bark pieces, some toothpicks, a fork, and I'm just dipping it in the ink and kind of making marks and seeing what kind of marks these different things make. So that was a toothpick. I'm going to try the fork. I had students a few years ago do portraits with forks like this, and they turned out really fun. And let's see, some bark. So I had a really skinny piece of bark, and it made a really nice line, almost like a calligraphy nib line. And I used the other end to make some smaller lines that just aren't very visible. Something wood is helpful. It kind of absorbs some of the ink. And then I got kind of this like raggedy bark piece, and I actually really love kind of the marks that you can make with that. So just experimenting with the different things you can find and what they need. And that's it. That's our media page.